Earning a PhD from IIT Kanpur, his scholarship spans the areas of philosophy, cognitive science, evolutionary theory, analytic philosophy, and mindfulness. Professor has published articles and book chapters that explore topics such as narrative and episodic self, epistemic justice, and experiential self, and so on. We are honored to have you here, sir. This session brings together two compelling papers by Shreesh Mishra and J. Manimekhla, both research scholars from the Center for Philosophy, JVU. I now request Professor to kindly take over and facilitate the session.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and good morning, everybody. I understand that we are already running late. In fact, I have come here mainly to regain my touch with Kant actually. So I don't know whether I deserve to be a chair or not, but still, thanks to the request of Professor Nataraj and Professor Smita, I agreed, that's all. So without further ado, let me start with the first speaker. Yeah, sorry, Shreesh. Shreesh. First speaker is Shreesh, who is doing PhD from here only in Lithuania. So you have around 15 minutes. What is it? Yeah, so you might take around 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah, please.
The session, each session will be 25 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please start. Please.
Okay, thank you. A very warm good morning to all of you.
You don't want to go there?
I can speak for
Okay.
So the title of my paper is Anonymous Consciousness, a Perception, Ipseity, and the Structure of Minimal Self. So I'll give a brief overview that what I'm going to present in my paper. So I'll start with by starting with the Kantian notion of the perceptions, and what was the main agenda of Kant to introduce the Kantian transcendental perceptions, and what are the basic characteristics of it when we deal with the Kantian notions of transcendental I or I think. And then I have two observations from Sartre actually that is there on the Kantian notion of formal I think, and that is where that he is actually making a comment that there is one link missing that doesn't that is not very much clear in the Kantian philosophy, that is what it is to be me. So taking that cue, that I'll move forward to the notion of minimal self, that I feel that there is some form of inspiration, or if I'm allowed to say that there is some form of dubbing that Zahavi does vis-a-vis to the notion of minimal self. Uh, and I'm trying to deal with that. That is it really something uh, like a like a principle of a self kind that can be really taken into account? And in the second part after that, I'm going to critique it actually, that it could be taken into as an account, but the kind of self, the notion of self that Zahavi is talking about, experiential kind, I don't think that it can be called as a self of uh, in that way. So I'll start with the Kant. So Kant starts in the critique of start his philosophy in the critique of purism by saying that the I think must be able to accompany all my representations, right? So in that sense, the transcendental I is a synthesizing entity for the intuitions that are received, that are given to us, directly given to us, but they cannot be cognized that way because they are given to us in a manifold. They are only cognized after they get refined and structured by the categories of thoughts. So the faculties of thoughts after systematize the intuitions, we cognize the experience. And the synthetic principle that Kant is actually espousing is the transcendental I, because it is not within the realm of experiences. It is something that we posit in order to reify or unify the experiences. So transcendental apperception or transcendental I think in Kantian philosophy is something that is a formal logical concept. It is not something which is there in the experiential flux. So so that is why Colin Marshall observed in his paper, that in the Kant's Metaphysics of Self, the paper, he says by anticipating Wittgensteinian claim to the Kant that the apperception actually doesn't belong to the world but is a limit of the world in some way, because beyond these categories, like there is this realm of noumena that you cannot know. The apprehension only gets possible after the reification through the categories. So, this is what Kant did in order to explain the objectivity of the cognition, at the same time the unity of experience. So what the unity of experience is something that will run throughout my paper, like parallelly with all of these scholars. So unity of experience is something that I'm taking, that how, like, later Sartre actually critiques Kant in some way, that this is actually unnecessary, that this positing. Uh, so yeah, so now I'll briefly highlight the two of the limitations that I find in the Stephen Priest's book, that is the subject in question, and he's talking about like Husserlian transcendental ego, as well as, like, he's referring in some portions about Kantian formal notion of transcendental apperception. So Sartre, where he writes that Sartre is right that Kant intends that transcendental unity of apperceptions to be purely formal thesis. It is less clear that it can be. It is not clear that the thesis can be true without being given some ontological interpretations or other. Because Kant, like, uses in the Critique of Pure Reason, when he was talking about the apperception, that this is ontologically neutral. So, to draw an analogy, it is uncontroversial that the proofs of pure mathematics and logic are formal in the sense that they obtain in virtue of their mathematical or logical form, and not in virtue of any one interpretation of them. They are valid irrespective of what their component sentences are true of. However, it is not clear that there could be soundness in logic without material truth, and there could not be material truth without material truth condition, and that implies an ontology. Similarly, although maths proves in mathematics holds irrespective of interpretation, it is not clear that there could be mathematics without mathematical reality. So, the Kantian pure formal condition for the possibility of experience cannot ground real material experiences. That is what I'm saying. I mean, it can work as a synthesizing principle, but like the way I am seeing it, like, if the unity of experience can be found within the experience itself, that is something which is more desirable to me, like, for the project. And so there, I mean, Sartre actually agreed with Kant that one of the conditions for the possibility of experience is that I can always regard one of my thoughts or experience as mine. But unlike Kant, he will wish to give it a content, an ontological realization. That is what I'm also espousing. So, yeah, like I already said, the Kant escapes the problem of what it is to be me in that sense. And how can something be me? That is a very ontologically rooted, something which is very much phenomenologically given to me in my, like, day-to-day, like, regular experiences. So now, like, this critique that I'm giving, and okay, I can go on, like, explaining here only that Sartre's critique. Sartre talks about, after that, Sartre in his philosophy, in his philosophy, talks about the differentiation between pre-reflective awareness and the reflective awareness. Pre-reflective awareness is something which is non-thetical, something which is non-positional, something like, he gives an example. For example, let's say, like, I'm in direct confrontation with the object. For example, let's say I'm reading a book. While reading that book, I might be completely engrossed in reading, and I might forget the awareness of that I-ness, like, that I am reading it, right? But at the same time, like, if immediately somebody asks me that, what are you reading, I can immediately answer that I am reading this particular book. So there is this awareness, directly reflexive awareness to me, that pre-reflective awareness to me, that what is the content of it, and I can understand that the consciousness was always directed towards that object. But nonetheless, this notion of ego, or this notion of I, was not there at the level of pre-reflective consciousness. At the level of reflective consciousness only, when Sartre claims that the moment we try to try to turn our gaze inwards and makes the consciousness an object of our experience, at that moment we get to experience an subject of any kind. So the subject is not there at the raw level, law phenomenological level. Conceptual consciousness is purely anonymous in that sense. Like it's bare consciousness doesn't involve any form of egocentricity or like ego, not egocentricity. Yeah. So this is what he says, that in that sense consciousness, with the help of intentionality, both like states of it, like reflective consciousness as well as pre-reflective consciousness, both are always directed towards something. And with the temporality aspect, like it always unifies itself. Sartre says consciousness unifies itself by escaping from itself. So consciousness is always unified. Like there is no I, or there is no transcendental I needed in order to unify it. So in that sense, like Sartre's claim is that transcendental ego of any formal kind or of that sort is something which is extravagant. We don't need it. It's unnecessary to possess. Now that I'm now like shifting my project a bit to the Zahavi's notion of minimal self, which I feel that there is something to do with the Kantian notion of the structural or the formal conceptions of the transcendental I. So Zahavi talks about an experiential self or phenomenal self. Zahavi, Son Gallagher, and sometimes Ria Kriegel also like talks about the experiential self, which to them is the primary to the experience, and it has something to do with the experiential self has something to do with what it is like feelings, what it is like characters. So whenever we come into the contact of object, we get to understand the objective characters of the like objective properties, for example, like the colors, colors, touch, and these things. And other than that, there is this subjective aspect of these qualities, that there is something that is subjectively feel to touch something or to understand. For example, if I'm sipping a cup of coffee, there is a very subjective feeling what it is feel for me to have that cup of coffee. So this is something which is called the what it is like character in that experience, and this is what is also called the phenomenal experience. So Zahavi is saying this is something which is given to us. Like whenever we come into the perception, whenever we come into direct contact with the objects, we get to have the subjective side of the experience, which is the qualitative aspect of the experience, and it is not exhausted by the objective qualities that are there. Like this is something which is extra in some sense, like something which is subjectively there. So Zahavi is actually like formulating the notion of minimal self with this concept of givenness, that is this phenomenal experience aspect. At the same time, he's also saying that this phenomenal experience comes with an aspect of it which he calls the forminess or the Ipseity. So forminess is something to Zahavi is that whenever we are having a phenomenal experience, there is a sense attached. Like we are also aware of it, that this particular phenomenal experience is given to me and only me. So this is a mode, like this is a privilege of the mode, like the privilege of like that I and only I can have this particular feeling in some sense, in very meek sense. So experience in a mode of first person givenness, a mode of disclosure, that is a phenomenological basic form of reflexive self experience. So what makes a particular conscious state subjective is that it is always given in the first personal presentation. When we investigate appearing object, we also disclose ourselves as datives of manifestations as there to whom object appears. Now, I'll focus a bit about this concept of mindness, because this is some important to Zahavi, because this is where Zahavi is actually putting the burden of the selfhood of minimal kind to this phenomenal awareness, right? So mindness is a quality of various modes of first personal givenness. It could involve the perceptual kind, imaginative, recollective, through which intentional content is given. Mindness reveals a conscious states being owned, a states being immediately recognized as given to or for a particular subject, and that is what he's called like minimal self, with the givenness aspect and this particular like mindness feeling that is directly like ushering into your interiority. Um, so Zahavi wrote in his book that when I am aware of an occurrent pain, perception, or thought from the first person perspective, the experience in question is given immediately, non inferentially, and non criterially as mine. So now, the thing is, Zahavi is saying that this mindness feeling is an invariant structural aspect of the consciousness. That this particular mode, or the structural feature, this mindness is an invariant structural mode of the consciousness that pervades various modes of first personal givenness, and not a product of an explicit act of self reflection or self perception. So so when we live through a number of different experiences, the dimension of first person experience remains the same. So we are having different sum of experiences, but this dimension that is like that is occurring, this is the same, and it may be described as an invariant dimension of first personal givenness throughout the multitude of changing experiences. So now this particular mode of experience that is given to us, he's shifting this notion of self from the substantival kind or the metaphysical substantival kind to locating to this invariable aspect of the consciousness which is there in the phenomenal consciousness, and saying that this can work as a form of minimal selfhood, since it is invariably there since the birth of the subject and till the death. So this is something which is always there in the embodiment, and this can work as a unifying principle, something which is invariably there, and like he's ready to grant it like the status of the selfhood of a minimal kind. But there is a difference. So now, when we talk about so Zahavi talks about, so whenever we talk about this phenomenal experiences, Zahavi writes, he himself write that this kind of experience is not something where the ownership is attributed to a subject, but it would be better if we call it the ownership of a subjectivity. Like it's not an ownership of subject. So in that sense, like he wrote it at one place, but at the same time he's making it as an egological notion. Like in his writing, he's also saying that this is an egological notion, and he's describing the differentiation in his book, which was published in 2005, that the egological notion, in the notion of egological, the attribution of ownership occurs to the subject, and in the non-egological notion of self, or the notion of subjectivity, like people, the Buddhist scholars, or like Miriam Bahari and Dreyfus and these philosophers, the notion of non-egological self, should the ownership is there, but that ownership is not of a subject kind. Like it is something which is like part of the subjectivity, and there is no like invariable subject that is there, like standing and like unifying all the experiences in one. So Kruger, in one of his paper, like What and How of the Experiences, talks about it, and actually like showcases this irony and this discrepancy that he's actually explaining all the characteristics of a non-ecological kind, but by making mindness something invariable, he's making it is an ecological conception which is not accepted, because if we talk about the manifold of experiences and this invariable mode is something which is there, then we can talk about Metzinger's concept of error of phenomenal reification. That reification, he like this error of Metzinger's like phenomenal reification, he actually explains by citing Zahavi's paper, by saying that now Zahavi, what he's doing, that this invariance principle, he's like also saying that this is a structural form, that this is something which is formal condition. This modeness is something which is formal and structurally there, and there is nothing subject of a kind according to him. So through this mode of operation, that you are granting this invariable structure to the consciousness, but he's saying that there is no link. If this invariable principle of mindness is something which is formal of some kind, and it is not experientially located of that way, then you cannot reify it in a way, because there is no link as such. So that is what Metzinger has called the error of phenomenological reification. Okay. Then so yeah, this is one of the criticism. Then in the last part, I would deal with Miri al-Bahari's like notion of perspectival ownership and the personal ownership. So Miri al-Bahari actually supports a non-ecological concept of selfhood, or better we'll say the subjectivity. There, like she talks about two kinds of ownership. Like one is perspectival ownership. For example, when like there are cases, there are depersonalized cases where that she quotes and talks about a case study of DP. So DP doesn't have an ability to construct a narrative self or an autobiographical self or something that he forgets. Like he has a very little time span of memory, but in that little time span, like he is not, I mean, he's not able to formulate for a very long period of time of a narrative construction of the self. At the same time, like he is someone, he's not able to uh, like own the body also, in that sense. Like he's not having whatever the content that is coming to his mental state, he's not feeling that I am the subject of it, but he is perspectively able to like apprehend it and able to like feel it, that this is mine, in that, not in a very subject sense but in a very subjectivity sense, that he's having a very rich interiority, like the very rich interiority that is happening in his like mental states, and he's able to have that, but he's not able to have a ownership of a personal kind, like there is no relationship of a subject pole or object pole, in that sense, very strict. So in that sense, like the conclusion of mine is that um, the Zahavi's principle to some extent borrows the Kantian uh, principle of transcendental apperception, that it is a formal condition for the cognition, and Zahavi is actually taking that account and trying to like locate a phenomenal notion of minimal self, that is invariable principle, into the phenomenal experience, into the very flux of experience, and trying to locate that by giving that particular mode, giving it invariable principle, that she's saying that this can Zahavi is saying that this can work as a minimal form of selfhood. But that how Kruger has shown that there is a discrepancy in his sightings, that he's talking about the subject differentiation between subjecthood and the subjectivity, but at the same time, like he is saying that this invariance principle can work can work as a selfhood of a minimal kind. So in that sense, I'll I think the Kruger non-ecological conception, and all the Miri al-Bahari, these people are actually like explaining the consciousness in a very autonomous and very anonymous way. That is the very structure of consciousness, and the ego part is actually not there in the consciousness, and the unity of experience doesn't actually necessitates it. Like the consciousness actually unifies it through itself, and there is no necessity for either of a metaphysical self or a transcendental kind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shreesh. Thank you, Shreesh. So it was indeed an interesting attempt to shed light on Kant's notion of perception from contemporary phenomenology and cognitive science. Well, now it is open for discussion. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Shreesh. It was very interesting to listen to your paper. You can take this as some comments maybe to just work on. I just thought two things that you could have reflected more on. One of the things is that the idea of the ontological experience of knowledge in Kant comes about in the form of judgment. So judgment as a faculty of subsumption of the particular under the universal is supposed to be the faculty that enables the individualized experiences of knowledge possible. So that is one thing. The other thing is that this is very essential in Kant is that when we speak about the transcendental unity of a perception, we also have to talk about the idea of self-affection. Kant also talks about just like the things in themselves affect us for knowledge to be possible, the self also affects us in a way. And this is a weird notion in Kant. I mean, it's not fleshed out well, but this also leads to a kind of the possibility of empirical self-knowledge.
Yeah.
And so that is something that you can also add in into your mix, and I think that will make the paper rich and profound. Yeah. Thanks.
Do you want to respond, or it's more like a comment?
It's a comment, I think. Yeah.
You agree with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was wondering, your minimal self seems a little too minimal.
Yeah.
Because what's the role of memory and so on here? How do you, because supposing in each instant I'm conscious of something as mine, and in the next instant I forget it, then I'm just a minimal self-consciousness in each instance, right? There is no, I mean, does that constitute even a minimal self? If the self itself is divided in each instance, okay, fine. You don't have bare consciousness; you also have self-consciousness in each instance. But Kant's whole point is that in order to even have that bare consciousness, you need to have this transcendental unity of I, which is spread out over time and so on and so forth, which requires memory, which require so all the examples he gives of drawing a line, counting till 5. If you keep leaving out, so you're perfectly conscious when you're counting 1, 2, but if you keep leaving out the previous 1, when you're going to 2, you'll never get to, like 5 as a concept would have no meaning. Right? Similarly, if you keep dropping out the previous synthesized element, when you draw a line, you don't get a line, right? So there is a minimal unity needed for any kind of experience to be possible, right?
But I guess, Professor, when they are talking about minimal self, they are talking about the very bare form of consciousness, and this debate also occurs vis-a-vis to the primacy debate between minimal self and narrative selves. So Dennett and all, they try to explain the whole consciousness through the narrative conception of self as well. So minimal self doesn't have to necessarily.
Is a much higher order thing. Right?
Yeah, but
we are talking about bare self-consciousness. I thought the whole thrust of your presentation was to suggest that this much is enough. To have a bare self-consciousness is enough, and you don't need a transcendental unity of apperception and all the rest of it, which Kant puts out, right? Just this much is enough. And that is enough to explain everything. But I'm suggesting to you that it's not, right? Narrative self and so on comes narrativization is already a function of memory and retention and protension, all the rest of it. It has a temporal discursivity and so on. So that comes at a much higher order, unification, synthesizing.
I'll think about it maybe
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
Just one suggestion. When you speak about subject and subjectivity, I think you should dig more into the differentiating of the two, because it is a very superficial distinction is not enough. You have to find out the inner meaning. What is the meant by being aware of being a subject and being aware of having subjectivity. So that difference is to be discussed in more detail.
Ma'am, that happened precisely because of due to the lack of time, I guess. Because
Okay, it's my suggestion.
because I really wanted to like put out the arguments and not go into the descriptions of it. So yeah, that happened majorly because of that. Yeah.
Are there more questions? Yeah. Otherwise, okay. Thanks a lot for it. Okay, our next speaker is J. Manimekhla. He's also a student here. PhD. So what's the title of the talk? Yeah. Embodied freedom, human dignity, autonomy. Yeah, please start.
Good morning, everyone. The title of my presentation is Embodied Freedom, Human Dignity, Autonomy, and Gender through a feminist, phenomenological, and Kantian lens. So, this paper explores the intricate relation of human dignity, autonomy, and gender through a synthesis of Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy and phenomenological insights from Merleau-Ponty, Simon de Beauvoir, augmented by contemporary feminist thinkers like Young and Butler. So, the traditional Kantian autonomy, framed as disembodied, rational self legislation, overlooks the gendered constraint of lived embodiment, such as societal norms and violence that undermine agency. So, by integrating Merleau-Ponty's body subject and de Beauvoir's situated freedom with relational autonomy models, the paper which I'm proposing here, it says that an embodied ethics where dignity emerges relationally through incorporeal recognition. And this framework addresses exclusion of marginalized identities, offering implications for feminist ethics, bodily rights, and social justice. So, human dignity and autonomy stands as cornerstones of ethical discourse, yet their conceptualization often privileges abstract rationality over concrete realities of embodied existence. So, Kant's moral philosophy posits autonomy as the capacity for rational self governance, where individuals legislate universal moral laws via categorical imperative, thereby securing dignity as an absolute inner worth. This view empowers individuals against instrumentalization, declaring that humanity must always be treated as an end in itself, never merely as means. However, Kantian universality assumes a sort of neutral, disembodied agent, sidelining how gender, embodiment, and social structures shape moral agency. So, phenomenology disrupts this abstraction, and Merleau-Ponty's radical insistence on the primacy of perception reveals the body not as an object but as the very medium of subjectivity, the body subject through which we perceive, act, and constitute meaning. And Simone de Beauvoir extends this to gender, analyzing women's oppression as an embodied situation that confines them to immanence, thwarting transcendence. And contemporary feminists like Young illuminate feminine motility, the inhibited, objectified movement ingrained by particular norms, while Butler's performativity theory exposes gender as a stylized repetition of acts materialized through discourse and power. So I argue for a phenomenological Kantian synthesis of dignity and autonomy as relational corporeal phenomena, and societal gender expectations enable yet constrain human flourishing, with violence and marginalization eroding self-respect. So, by weaving Kant's normative universality with the phenomenological particularity, we reclaim freedom as a lived practice, responsive to intersectional experiences. So, I'll talk a little about Kant's idea of dignity and autonomy. So, in Kant's ethical system, articulated in the groundwork of metaphysics of morals and critique of practical reason, centers autonomy as the essence of freedom. But autonomy derives from self-legislation, where the rational will author, maxims compatible with categorical imperative act only according to that maxim where you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So this independence from sensible inclination elevates the human will above heteronomy driven by desire or external authority. So dignity follows intrinsically. Rational beings possess absolute inner worth incomparable to market price or mere utility, demanding unconditional respect. So Kant's formula of humanity reinforces this act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. So dignity thus becomes the ground of rights, shielding against degradation. So, in a gendered context, this universality promises protection from objectification such as violence or coercion, reproductive ideas, aligning with the paper's idea to reclaim dignity and marginalization. Yet, limitations emerge, and Kant's agent is a noumenal self, pure reason abstracted from phenomenal embodiment. So, inclinations, including bodily needs, are deemed non moral obstacles, potentially devaluing affective and corporeal dimensions. So Kant's own anthropology reflects this. Women associated with sensibility and reproduction exhibit beautiful understanding rather than rigorous virtue suited for private spheres. While he grants women rational potential, citing exemplary figures like heroic mothers, this embeds gender hierarchy, obscuring how embodiment structures agency. So feminist interpreters such as those in feminist interpretations of Immanuel Kant argue this abstraction fails embodied subjects, particularly women whose situatedness, social roles, biology intersect with reason. So, Kantian dignity, though aspirational, requires incarnation to address these real world exclusions. So, talking about the embodiment idea which I'm bringing in, phenomenology reframes autonomy through the lived body, and Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology of perception dismantles Cartesian dualism, positing the body as the origin of conscious experience. Contrary to Kant's intellectualist I think, Merleau-Ponty declares I can, the body's motor intentionality projects into the world via the intentional arc, weaving perception, past habits, and future goals. So the body is not an object among objects, but the body subject, the horizon of all experience. Habits like a pianist fluid's motions exemplify this. Freedom manifests in skills, ambiguous engagement, not detached willing. So Merleau-Ponty also introduces the idea of flesh, a chiasmic intertwining of my body and the world. So perception is reversible. I touch and I'm touched. Seeing foster corporeity. The primordial sociality preceding language. This relational ontology challenges Kant's monological self. Autonomy arises intersubjectively through embodied reciprocity. Also, de Beauvoir radicalizes this for gender in the second sex, drawing on Merleau-Ponty and Sartre. She rejects biological determinism. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. And women's bodies are mythologized. Passive, cynical immanence versus male descendants imposed by the other gaze. Yet ambiguity persists, and the body for others objectifies, but the body for itself enables projects. So, freedom demands transcending this situation via reciprocal recognition, as explored in the ethics of ambiguity, where moral action affirms others' freedom amid situated constraints. So, de Beauvoir bridges Kant. Her situated autonomy retains self legislation but yet embeds it in embodiment. And gender violence exemplifies this embodiment, reducing the body to a means, violating Kantian dignity through phenomenological alienation. She has also described a woman as a free subject, trapped in her situatedness as a woman, and abjectly denies a natural or eternal feminine essence that results in differences in women's behavior and psychology. Also, Young has put that it was central to her argument to present an alternative to arguments for equality that erase the factor of sexual difference while acknowledging how patriarchal ideologies exploit these differences to the advantage of men. And one of the effects of this exploitation and oppression was to deprive women of their can-do bodies. Okay. So, inspired by these feminist phenomenologists, she has argued that any female individual who enacts the existence of women in patriarchal society is living a contradiction. As a free subject, as a human, she can participate in transcendence, but as a woman, she is denied this potential as well as her subjectivity. So, this tension between transcendence and immanence, between subjectivity and being a mere object, is also developed by Young into modality of ambiguous transcendence. And the second modality of inhibited intentionality occurs when a female individual considers engagement with a task and considers the possibilities of carrying it out. She projects a general I can, but a personal I cannot at the same time. So Young and Beauvoir both highlight the situatedness of the female body and cultural and social influences of the female situation, especially on socialization and conditioning that is subjected to young children. Young argues that it is in progress of growing up as a girl that modalities of feminine comportment, motility, and speciality start to manifest themselves in female person's embodiment. So, feminist critique have adapted Merleau-Ponty to observe feminine embodiment, and women move with inhibited intentionality, both simultaneously subject and object, hesitating under the male gaze. So, unlike Merleau-Ponty transcend scare, women's gesture betray ambivalence, non-committal throws, cramped strides, inculcated by socialization. This constrains autonomy, spatial confidence, essential for agency in gender, and echoing Kant's oversight of material conditions. Also, Butler shifts to performativity that gender is not a sense but a citational practice, repeated acts congealing into illusory substance via regulatory power. And Merleau-Ponty's ambiguity is politicized bodies materialized through discourse, naturalizing binaries. So Kantian universality participates, but it's neutral humanity mass heteronormative exclusions, where dignity accrues to properly performed subjects. So relational autonomy thinkers like Jennifer Nedelsky and Marilyn Friedman counter atomism, and they reconceive autonomy as nested in supportive relations, boundaries, and connections, challenging Kant's isolated legislature. Friedman emphasizes social context enabling choice, vital for gendered agents navigating oppressions. These critiques reveal dignity's fragility, marginalization disembodies, and fracturing self respect. So, I'm offering a synthesis towards an embodied relational autonomy, so which retains kind of Kant's normative core while phenomenologically enriching it. So dignity as an end in itself persists, but autonomy becomes rational intercorporeal self-determination. And Merleau-Ponty mediates a categorical imperative application where maxims universalize through embodied horizons. Also, de Beauvoir's ambiguity ensures moral responsibility amid constraints, freedom on ongoing project, not static possession. So, relationality resolves tension, and autonomy is not solitary but intersubjective. Dignity demands recognition enacted in fleshly encounters. And gendered embodiment illustrates violence and violates ends formulas by objectifying bodies, but feminist practices like consciousness raising reclaim motility, fostering transcendence. And Butler's performativity invites subversion, disrupting norms, expands dignity's scope. So this model addresses the abstract concern, like Kantian universality accommodates plurality via situated reason, and phenomenological insights counter disembodiment, validating minority experiences, and practically it implies policies supporting embodied flourishing reproductive rights, anti-violence measures as dignity enablers. So I propose a relational situated autonomy that blends Kant's moral dignity with phenomenological emphasis on the lived body and feminist intersectionality. Freedom emerges as a corporeal, rational phenomenon addressing ethical issues like bodily rights, oppression, and social justice through embodied ethics. And this interdisciplinary approach enriches moral philosophy by recognizing autonomy as practiced via perception, movement, and social relations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manimekhla. It was indeed a good attempt to investigate Kant in the light of contemporary feminism, embodiment, and all this. Now it is open for discussion. Any question, comments, feedback? It's a working paper. What is it? Yeah, so please give your comments so that she will be able to develop the paper further. Yeah.
Thanks, Manimekhla. It was a very well done paper. No, I was just thinking, like trying to understand the lack of the body component in Kant. So where does it arise? So I was thinking, look on in the in the groundwork, third section of the groundwork, he talks about human beings as having two different memberships, right? One, the world of sense and the world of understanding. And he says that within the world of sense, we can talk about not just sensibility but also understanding and reason. But when it comes to the world of understanding, he says that we can only talk about reason. And so, very evidently, there is this element of sensibility missing from within the intelligible world. And so that begs the question as to how exactly can we be moved to act morally. I mean, we can make decisions, right? But how do we convert these decisions to actions? And that requires, our body to, I mean, at least also our body, right? Physical natures also need to be in play. And Kant problematizes this. He talks about, what he calls as the philosopher's stone. And, and this is a, whole issue in the secondary literature as to how to resolve this problem. But I think, with all the rich details you gave, I think you can also think about incorporating this specific issue, because I think this is the root of the lack of this body component in Kant. And just also to add one more quick point is that a number of yesterday Professor Arindam was mentioning about K.C. Bhattacharya, for example. He criticizes Kant on this account of lack of the body. Then there is Nikunja Bihari Banerjee, another well-known Indian Kant scholar. He also mentions this as well. So I think you can take them as comments and feel like you can respond.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, so I came late and I mean, not all I heard is it's well structured and written and formulated. I really like the expression. And so my question, maybe a comment, is from Kant. He has pointed out this whole, the kind of not early modern tendency to negate the body in favor of epistemology. I mean, I would call it nobility. Well, you can say it's just a method of philosophy. It's not. Every method has a strategy, a kind of program behind it. Yeah. So from Kant to Husserl, that's my point. When the transcendental philosophy in the 19th century, somehow supported or criticized by neo-Kantianism, then phenomenology, which also through Brentano and kind of heritage they have from the Kant, and Merleau-Ponty clearly is known to be a revisionist of phenomenology.
Yeah.
So then it's always back to phenomena. We all know that it's not sufficient. So with Merleau-Ponty, especially the works on aesthetics, like the Doubting Cézanne or the spirit, I don't know, the guy. Yeah, the mind and the eye of the mind, Geistunauge in German. So he clearly he points to a reversal of the directionality of knowing things. So like a still life, say that it's not that we are seeing the objects are seeing us. But I mean, it's not seeing, looking us. I mean, it's a kind of not just seeing. So this is the programmatic reversal that happens with Merleau-Ponty, and I agree with you. This is again, once you admit the factum of body in the mind. I mean, this starts with Brentano, who was a great revolutionary. I mean, sense that intentional inexistence of object. Although it's in the consciousness, but you are admitting a body and you are completely negating Kant in that. And you can see from Brentano to Merleau-Ponty, that emancipation of body within the context of transcendentalism, I would argue.
You want to respond? You agree with
I
that?
think, yeah, I think that was a comment. I'll try to incorporate more on this. And yeah, thank you, sir.
Anybody else wants to give any feedback? Otherwise, okay. Thanks a lot, Manimekhla.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the session is over. Yeah, sure, sure. Should we come back?
And then there was this one moment I was seeing the text in the this is a kind of harmony composition.
I suppose it's 40 to 45.
You have 5 minutes. So I thought, coming here because of whatever they heard about the articles. Coming here and you're going to hate it. They're the best ones. I even know philosophy. Yeah. The beauty is non-philosophy used to be
Here we begin with the next academic session. Chair of the session is Professor Peter McLaughlin, who is the Emeritus Professor of Philosophy at Heidelberg University, where he has been a leading figure in philosophy of science, philosophy of biology, and early modern philosophy. Trained in ethology and philosophy, he previously held research and teaching positions at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science, University of Constance, and Johns Hopkins University. His work integrates rigorous historical scholarship with systematic philosophical analysis, especially concerning teleology, functional explanation in biology, and the conceptual foundations of mechanics. Among his recent publications is The Creation of Numbers from Clay, Understanding Demerow's Theory of Material Abstraction, which reassesses material abstraction in the historical emergence of numerical cognition. In Kant's Antinomies of Pure Reason and the Hexagon of Predicate Negation, he develops a formal logical model illuminating Kant's resolution of the antinomies. Professor McLaughlin's scholarship remains influential for contemporary debates at the intersection of history, epistemology, and the life sciences. Speaker of the session is Dr. Nishad Patnaik, who teaches philosophy in the Department of Social Sciences and Humanities at Indraprasth Institute of Information Technology, Delhi, and has previously taught at IIIT Hyderabad, IIT Delhi, and Westchester Community College, New York. He received his master's and PhD in philosophy from the New School for Social Research, New York. German idealism, classical phenomenology, socio-political philosophy, Marx and critical theory, psychoanalysis, deconstruction, and philosophy of technology are his major areas of research. He has published numerous articles in referred journals, and his latest book, Modernity and Its Futures Past, Recovering Unalienated Life, explores unalienated existence and modernity's emancipatory possibilities. His recent article, The Narrativizations of Time, Paul Ricoeur on Memory and History in Sophia, addresses the hermeneutic intertwining of temporal and historical dimensions. I request Dr. Nishad Patnaik to start with the presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure being here. Of course, I've been associated with JNU informally, well, ever since I can remember. So it's like coming back home. And I'll be here again at the end of the month. So this is a very familiar room to me. In any case, what I want to do today, this paper is kind of an exposition, but what I want to bring out is the dynamic aspect of